Relevant links, wherever applicable, will be shared in the chat, so you can keep a lookout there. TARSHI is a not-for-profit organization that promotes safe, inclusive spaces that advance people's well-being and their agency over their sexuality and SRHR. We do this through information dissemination, capacity and perspective strengthening, and cultivating platforms for conversations on sexuality and well-being using a feminist and intersectional lens. In Plainspeak, or IP, as you would hear it, was originally TARSHI's quarterly print publication, created as part of the South and Southeast Asia Resource Center on Sexuality from 2005 to 2009. It found a new life digitally as a bi-monthly and now monthly online magazine in 2013. We celebrated 100 issues of IP in March 2022 and 10 years in December 2023. The purpose of the magazine is to generate dialogue as well as to create and curate writing on issues around sexuality, sexual and reproductive health and rights, comprehensive sexuality education, as well as stress and well-being in the global South, in both English and Hindi. We want to make conversations around these topics accessible to all. In June and July, the TARSHI's in Plainspeak issues are exploring the theme queering as a way of life. We understand queering as more than just an adjective. It's a verb, an action that involves questioning accepted perspectives and challenging normative ways of being in the world. It goes beyond binaries of gender and sexuality to encompass a broader spectrum of experiences and identities. If queerness is identity, then queering is action. And you don't need to be queer yourself to queer in your daily lives. And queering can be anything that goes beyond what's considered normal, in quotes, or what's considered normative. It can be as simple as women going out to work 100 years ago, which was not the norm then. So they were queering certain social norms and customs in their time. It can be the kind of families you have, for example, single mothers or single fathers bringing up children, or divorced parents bringing up children together, even when they are not married or living together. So queering can be anything and everything. It can be a part of your daily lives in many different ways. You can read more about this and our theme, as well as go through the June issue on this theme on our website. In light of this theme, and with July being Disability Pride Month, this webinar will explore what is queering all about and how it can be a part of our lives. How can we question normative ideas of pleasure and desire for persons with disabilities? And can these be an act of queering? Why are safe, inclusive, and self-affirming spaces relevant in understanding the diversity in people's experiences related to sexuality? This webinar would not be possible without our speakers. Let me introduce them to you all. We have ABHISHEK ANICCA. ABHISHEK is a writer, poet, and performer. He is the author of The Grammar of My Body, a collection of memoir essays on living with locomotor disability and chronic illness. We also have Srinidhi Raghavan. Srinidhi is a disabled feminist, educator, writer, and researcher. She has conducted trainings, undertaken and coordinated feminist research, and built programs on sexuality, leadership, digital access, security and usage, violence against women with disabilities, sexual and reproductive health, and media representations of children and disabled people. She is co-lead programs at the feminist disability rights organization Rising Flame, where she focuses on building and deepening the organization's work. I welcome you both, ABHISHEK and Srinidhi. It's very lovely to have you here.
So good to be here. Thank you.
Let's begin with a round of short questions. First, for Abhishek, feel free to respond in just 2-3 sentences. What does queering mean to you in the context of your life? What comes to your mind when you hear that word?
Well, querying means finding an alternative way when you don't fit into the normative. For me, the path has been very organic in a way. It's not that I didn't want to fit in. I tried my best to fit in to the normative, but I realized I couldn't. In any way, not even like 10%. So I think querying became first. It became a refuge, and then it became an affirmation, a safe space. So that's, I think, for most people exploring querying, as I think it's for me. It's personally, it's primarily uh, an attempt to seek safe space and affirmation, then pleasure seeking. The pleasure part comes later, but primarily it is just to seek a space because we all want to belong somewhere, and that's it, you know. And queerness gives you the umbrella where you can belong and yet not belong.
Thank you, Abhishek. Srinidhi, the same question for you as well, and I would love to know your quick insights. What does queering mean to you with respect to your lived experiences, and what comes to your mind when you hear that term?
A lot of resonance with what Abhishek said. But when I was thinking of this question, I was reminded of Bell Hooks's response to what queer means. And it's something that I think for a large part of my life, once I discovered this quote, it felt very true to the experience. I just want to read it because I feel like she has done quite a lot of, I mean, it does justice to what I feel. Is queer not as being about who you're having sex with, that can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it and that has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. And I think that that trajectory, which even Abhishek mentions, is really about what it feels like to be at odds with everything and to find your place within, find your place, right? And then find others who are also seeking that place to be with, let's say. So I do feel like it is something about going beyond the expectations that exist for each of us. By going beyond, I mean that not being able to meet them, so having to do something else altogether.
Thank you so much, Srinidhi, and that was a lovely quote. Thank you for sharing with us. Now, I think it makes sense to ask the same question to our audience. What does queering mean to you? A Menti link has been shared in the chat. You can go to the chat and access it. Please use that to respond. We plan to collate these responses anonymously into a short piece for the July Querying is a Way of Life issue. So we would love to know what you think about querying, how it plays a role in your lives, and how you understand it for yourself. Thank you. Now let's get back to our speakers. Since both Abhishek and Srinidhi have contributed to In Plainspeak over the years, I would like to request them to read a little bit from their pieces before I ask my next questions. Abhishek, let's start with you. Abhishek will be reading us a short extract from his essay titled Sexy Crib Desires, which was published in the February 2023 issue of In Plainspeak, which was themed on accessibility and sexuality. Abhishek, over to you.
Okay. So I'm a person with disability and chronic illness, just in case uh, that's not clear. As a disabled person, it is difficult to explain your body to others. It is also difficult to explain your body to your desires. Pleasure is easier to understand, although that requires some amount of self-love. The world continues to confuse pleasure with sex, and that is perhaps the reason why so many of us are forced to put ourselves out there in many ways that make us fragile. With disabled and chronically ill people, this confusion is heightened by the betrayals of the body. We are likely to lose control in bed and in life. Vulnerabilities might seem attractive on paper, but in real life, everyone wants a normal life. This often leaves us stranded, being pulled apart in different directions. In our conversations, we are always looking for love. In our bodies, pleasure. In our minds, sex. All three would be great, but life would be better if we had at least one of those.
Thank you, Abhishek. You all can read Abhishek's full piece. I believe it will be shared in the chat. Abhishek, I have a question for you. What does it mean to be quote unquote normal in our society? This is something you touch upon in your recent book, The Grammar of My Body, as well, particularly the chapter titled The Queerness of My Disabled Body. How do people with disabilities queer their lives in opposition to what is considered normative when it comes to bodies, desires, and pleasure?
In our society, the idea of a sexual body or a productive body or is very normative. It's very like, even when we imagine sex, there is a immense focus on missionary sex because that's how we imagine it to be. So you will hear men and women being told to lose weight before marriage so that chances of sex and getting impregnated is better or something like that. It's like stupid, but if you consider the history Kama Sutra in this land, but that's how the normative works. It is very caged, and I think that normativity is never leaves you. The idea to conform to that normativity, and even in when you find ways of querying yourself, even if you find an alternative path, you have to belong, and that process is much more difficult for disabled people, especially because most of them are dependent on their parents for caregiving. So even if they are not, even if they don't like the normative, even if they don't like the heteronormative system, I see many disabled men who get married, get into arranged marriage with someone with similar disability, and it's because it's the simplest thing they can do to belong. You know, that is a way for them. It's an attempt for them to belong somewhere, because otherwise they won't belong. It's very, because I live in Patna right now. The only way to get respect for you is either to earn a lot of money, to do a serious job, or to get married and have kids, no matter what do. So when you fail in everything on those parameters, and most disabled people do, then how do you fit yourself in a society like that? And so queerness is it's a space away from it where you find relief, but the relief isn't permanent, because there is no, even within queerness, it is very difficult sometimes to find that the feeling of belongingness. I have tried for a long time, and I find queer circles also to be quite difficult to fit into. And but let's just imagine queerness as a relief, as a place where one can escape to, and where one can belong, one can find belongingness. Then also a disabled person, because of their needs and their they have to come back to a normative society. And even house, for example, if you are looking for a house, if a disabled person is looking for a house, my the agent who was advising me said कि सर आपको बताना क्यों है कि आप में प्रॉब्लम है. तो मैंने बोला कि I have to tell them because otherwise they will come one day and throw me out. But everything is dependent on your on fitting in. And even if I got a house, when I got a house, they took my parents' ID cards to just give me a house. So that is the process you go through, and that's why you want the idea of queerness to be much more acceptable in the world. But being queer is much more of a to be a queer person in Delhi or Bombay is still something romanticized. to be a queer person in Patna means you would be, you know, people would, there is a lot of stigma against queer people. Queerness brings even more stigma. You know, one of my school friends recently asked me, ki, so now you are into everyone. And, you know, because it's a very, that's the only imagination of queerness within that space, within that normative space. So I think that is the main thing. And just the lack of sexual citizenship in this country for disabled people. And that was the point of writing the piece, because to tell that disabled people are sexual and they don't have the idea of sexual citizenship doesn't exist.
And how do you think the way disabled people practice sexuality differs from what society considers to be quote unquote normal or normative practice of society? Like in terms, if we consider queering as an action, then how are they queering what they think of, how they think of their bodies, or how they think of bodies of people they desire, and how they think of pleasure?
You know, and that's a very important point, and which I understood not from my experiences, but more from experiences of other people, disabled people I talk to. So one of my friends is quadriplegic, and he was telling me that self pleasure is such a big issue for him because he's not able to do self pleasure, and he lives with his family and has a 24/7 caregiving thing. So what does pleasure mean to him? So despite his body wanting pleasure and wanting that kind of desire fulfillment, he has to look for pleasure in the most weird kind of platonic love, friendship, because it's impossible for him to practice those desires, you know. And that itself is a form of queerness, because the only way where you can fit in terms of asexuality or platonic or whatever the term is you can identify as queer. But still people won't like to, not everyone would like to fit in that thing, because they are hopeful, they are full of hope that one day the able-bodied heteronormative society will come and say ki, no, today you will fit in. And you know, and so this guy said, you know, my thing works, but I still can't do anything about it. And it was very, you know, very stark reminder, because so much of self pleasure is taken for granted, leave aside sexual desire. So yeah, that's the basic thing, you know. And I often, you have to, when you're thinking about disability, instead of just thinking about yourself, of course with me talking about diapers and incontinence, that was a very stigmatic thing. But when you go into the lives of other disabled people, you feel like I am even there I am privileged in a way, you know, which is like impossible to imagine for a able-bodied person who is gazing at me, but who is rejecting my idea of my body. But for me, I feel like I'm enough. So yeah, that is the whole point of view.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Srinidhi, let's come to you. Srinidhi will be reading us a short extract from her interview with Shikha Elia, which was published in the August 2021 issue of Plainspeak, which was themed on disability and sexuality. Over to you, Srinidhi.
Thank you, Ari. When I think about disability and sexuality, I think of the vastness that both these terms contain, the spectrum, the diversity, the depths that exist within each word. Disability in itself is so wide-ranging. Sexuality has so many nooks and corners that we as a society and community are slowly discovering, putting together, and freeing up to interpret differently. A lot of people think when these two terms are brought together that we're talking about disabled people having sex, and we are, but it is so much more than that. In many conversations around disability and sexuality are about discovering how bodies of all kinds belong and occupy space in this world, and how bodies of all kinds can enjoy this engagement. In my experience of working in this space, I have found that a lot of information on and about sexuality remains or is still heavily directed at non-disabled people. The ideas around attraction, nonverbal communication, date night, sex, and relationships can all be skewed because of who they are directed towards. Including disabled people in the conversation means that how we see and perceive so many things changes. Does dating look the same? What facets are new in relationship when one person or both are disabled? How do disabled people describe attraction or romance? For example, let's take touch. For many disabled people, touch is an essential part of how they are supported in the world. Touch also forms a part of how we express intimacy, holding hands, leaning into each other's bodies. I'm reminded of this video in which Andrew Garza, a crippled content creator, speaks about finding a balance between needing support during sexy times, like being lifted into bed, help with taking clothes off, and keeping it playful, intimate, and fun for both parties. There is often a technical way of looking at sexuality when it comes to disabled people. But the more we speak about it, the more disabled people's experiences we make room for, the more expansive we can get around what disabled people's experiences of sexuality is. I found this article by Richa Kolpatte on chronic illness and sex very insightful because of this reason. Some of these tips might work for many different kinds of bodies. All the while, it is breaking away from rigid ideas around what sexual expression and sexual experiences look like.
Thank you so much, Srinidhi. You can read Srinidhi's full interview on our website, and the link has been shared in the chat. Srinidhi, building on what Abhishek has said so far, how do the actual lived realities and diverse experiences of disability give the lie to narrow stereotypes? And in what ways do persons with disabilities reimagine attraction relationships? For example, just now you gave an interesting example of touch. How else can we queer sexuality beyond the idea of a lack, that disabled people are lacking something?
I think by and large, the conversation that does exist around disability and sexuality is growing, right? It has changed a lot in the last few years. And that's because of many different communities and actors taking an interest in talking about this intersection. I think one of the things that I find interesting is the change in is the need for us when we talk about it amongst each other, how our parameters shift, right? Like reading Andrew Garza's, watching Andrew Garza's speak about this, it really helped me imagine this idea that support while having sex does not have to be ruin, quote unquote, ruin the mood, right? It can also be a way to be intimate and playful with each other, and what that means in relationships. But even what Abhishek was saying about this whole idea around people with disabilities having like the limited exposure that is there around who they can marry, what marriage could possibly look like for two disabled people, not just from same disabilities, but different disabilities, etc. All of these conversations don't exist, right? For a very long time, when I used to share about having a partner, one of the first things that people would ask me is that, how is he still around if you cannot do so many tasks because of your disability? Right? So there's this assumption within disability also of my gendering, right? The fact that I am a woman who needs certain supports, and that support does not mean that that support means that I might not have a partner, right? But it also erases my partner's disability. It erases his experience of the world, but it also erases the idea that we could make a new system, right, for what works in this relationship, right? And because there's so much like stigmatization around it, it becomes super hard for folks to talk about this openly, right? Because there are not perhaps enough face-to-face spaces for us to speak about this without having to worry about this person is going to talk about my sex life to 4 other people, right? Having a more conducive environment to talking about it. I think the big conversation around stereotypes is around what impacts large scale movies and let's say mainstream representation of disabled people does, right? I still remember a story from a couple of years ago when we had gone to to Varanasi, where we are working with young girls with disabilities. And one of them shared that she can't get married because she does not want to be carried around the fire, right? And it's the depiction from Man, the movie, that where he carries her around the fire, right? And it took us a lot of convincing to tell her, you can use your wheelchair and go around the fire if you want. You don't even need that fire if you don't want it. You can just go and get registered somewhere else, etc. It's the lack of the different options, but the variations of what relationships can be, what marriage can look like, what love can be, which sort of limits imagination around queering. But I think in many ways people are doing it, right? And are stepping outside of the confines of what society, quote unquote, expects out of all of us, and imagining more spaces with room for not fitting in, for failing at relationships, but still trying again, etc.
Thank you, Srinidhi. I think Abhishek and you, both of you have also brought up key, even with disabled people, the ultimate expectation always ends up being heterosexual marriage. Like you get the marriage done probably with another person with disability, and then life is sorted, everything will fall on track. So how do you think we can reimagine relationships with between people with disabilities, or between people in general, their ability or disability aside, beyond marriage, beyond monogamous heterosexual relationships, whether we are thinking of polyamory, whether we are thinking of friends with benefits, like along those lines, do you have any sort of like some brainstorming along with us?
I think it's a question of what do you say, having more information and stories out there, right? And something that Abhishek pointed to, which is definitely true. It's very different to be disabled in urban India and disabled in rural India, right? There is a stark difference. It's like being queer in Delhi, Bombay is not the same as being queer in other parts of the country. There is a lot of stigma around disability, and there is a lot of stigma around existing even factors, right? Like a lot of women with disabilities have to fight to be mothers, right? Which is not necessarily something that we see for women without disabilities. It's an expected outcome of being a woman, right? So sometimes even what society expects out of women without disabilities, women with disabilities don't have access to, or they have to really challenge the norm that they are not incapable, that they can be mothers, etc. So I feel like that we need a two set of the things, right? Because there are some needs that are that do exist, and that are in what do you say, that are an aberration from what is expected of women with disabilities, let's say. But it's not enough, right? Like we would all like more examples, and I think that that's primarily what I sometimes think is really helpful to have on social media, right? When you have when you realize that if 6 different people with 6 different autistic people talk about how their relationship looks, you realize that it can look 6 different ways, right? It is about that the diversity option, which perhaps in some ways we need more and more of, so that people can feel like that this is also a possibility for them, right? And that perhaps happens with having more conversations about it, and sort of allowing for ourselves to also not want either or the other outcome, right? Like if women with disabilities say that being a mother is very important to them, then we make room for this idea in the world, right? And what that means in terms of us also adapting, because that is also in many ways for women with disabilities queering, because they are able to, and you can see this with women who have, like Jija Ghosh, who struggled to adopt her child, right? And there was a case, if I'm right, about after she fought for this thing. And there are multiple women with disabilities who have experienced this discrimination at that stage, right? So I feel we need more of everything, right? So that we have, so that the later generations or the folks coming up can also be able to choose um, and be more aware that the option is not always having to be married, but the option can be other things as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Srinidhi. You have it exactly right. We need to make space for all sorts of options. Coming back to you, Abhishek. Elsewhere in your article for In Plainspeak, you write that, and I quote, the grind of navigating spaces which are openly hostile to your bodies becomes exhausting, and yet disabled people continue to search for little safe spaces of pleasure. In that context, what do you think is the importance of safe, inclusive, and self-affirming spaces, or as we at TARSHI like to call them, CISA spaces, not just for having these conversations about queering, but also putting it into practice?
I think without larger social change and perception about disability changing, chronic illness changing, this won't happen. We are at a very nascent stage of disability rights in this country. A lot of our disability rights discourse is borrowed and not organic. We are yet to even include a lot of invisible disabilities in our discourse. Um so we are, in that sense, that is not going to happen. What we have instead, and what we actually define as safe spaces, is an ecosystem that we have built where people can come out and freely talk about sex, sexuality, and disability. But that ecosystem is also a very, it's a space where it's not very open. You have to belong to that ecosystem. I have my own caste class privilege to belong, and language, so that I belong to the ecosystem. But there are many people who can't. Even that space is very limited, and it doesn't include lots of people from other caste, class, and there are lots of disabled, even minorities. We haven't seen a lot of, so when even when we see on Instagram, there's so many people doing wonderful things, but it's just that they don't get, because they don't have a language. That this ecosystem is also based on a language around disability, and and we have to break that language, and that's why all the conversation starts and end with what should we call you and what happens and falana dikana. It doesn't matter, it's not helping, because it's not changing any perception. Even some people who are brave enough to put out their stuff on Instagram, it's a point toss. Sometimes they get abused like hell, sometimes they are lucky, so people will say, okay, we'll let you exist. If you see the comments on by about people on Instagram, you will feel like they're letting you exist. Oh, very good, I will let you exist, we won't troll you, we won't show our dankness to you. So if that is not even, if that also is not a safe space, there are no safe spaces in this country for disabled people, unless they are physically wherever they live, there is acceptance. So to seek joy or pleasure, disabled joy is often misconstrued as disabled people smiling. That is not disabled joy for sure. But disabled joy in the long term, it will take a lot of effort. It will take uh, spaces which are much more friendly, and people who have less stigma for disability. Most people are so stigmatized about disability that just imagining them to, even in even in people who submit to heteronormative patriarchy and get married. I've heard so many stories of disabled people being discriminated within their own households, their opinions not being taken seriously, they've been sidelined all the time, the sexuality constantly being questioned by their friends. So it's not easy unless there is that change. The whole idea of what we have right now and what we can build on is, of course, more voices about pleasure and desire and disability. But yeah, it won't go a long way in changing how society perceives it, because you know in a lot of ways disabled people defy heteropatriarchy, because uh, there are certain assumptions with, especially, hegemonic masculinity is attached with ideas of independence and you know uh, non-emotional attachment or something, things like that, which are masculinity traits considered. And disabled people don't conform, men don't conform to that. Disabled women don't conform to the idea of domesticity, productivity at home, like whatever the ideals are, marriage and all of that. So the biggest heteropatriarchal organization for disabled people is a charitable organization which does mass wedding for disabled people, and it has much bigger base than any of the organizations which are part of our ecosystem, you know uh, and so once I was just putting out posting one of the videos, and someone said, how do they treat disabled people? I said, disabled people are like that. Let's not forget the social position of disabled people independently of their location, caste, and class identities. If you leave disabled people anywhere, they are considered not good enough to fit in again. So, yeah, for people to, of course, it would be celebrated if in any way they can become normal. So, for us to find pleasure, it was very important that uh, there are three ways out of it. One is to conform to heteropatriarchy, and then change the meaning of, confirm the idea of pleasure itself, which is actually very fruitful for a lot of disabled people, which is getting married, having children, or things like that. The second is to find queerness as a safe space and rebel in some way against heteropatriarchy. And the third way is, of course, to be in this complicated relationship with the world where you are neither straight nor queer. You are trying to confirm, belong, and yet never belonging. Belongingness is something that eludes you. And that's the state of a lot of disabled people. Narratives have gone, I think narratives have a limitation because uh, there's a certain, like, even because I have written a book about it, I now understand that it's impossible for people to actually read the book if they don't have it's almost a dystopian world for them, because their idea of world is so able-bodied. So when they step into my world of incontinence and piss and shit, it's it's a it's a dystopian novel for them. So it's a very difficult reality to embrace, and it won't change their ideas of what an able-bodied person is, what pleasure is, what human beings are like. It doesn't change. It is a, they would look at it as some kind of a non-normative thing only. So until that changes, I think pleasure won't be easily accessible. Because can you imagine people in India, disabled people in India, getting sexual rights, sexual citizenship? In Amsterdam, they don't even say, but they give a certain amount to every disabled person apparently, so that they can exercise their sexual freedoms. But if someone raises the idea of sexual citizenship, suddenly there would be a panic, and the kind of taboo that a disabled woman and their sexuality carry, and it's encouraging, there is a consensus that it should be suppressed. So in that scenario, how we can of course talk, and we can build our own idea of what the world should be, but unless the world itself, it's I see this as a process, and I often tell people that of course we can keep doing our work, but we have been doing our work for some time now. It's the time for the able-bodied world to respond, and it has not been responding. Who have been responding? People who have identified as disabled, people who have chronic illnesses, who have invisible disabilities, who have, come over to our side. So that has happened, but the able-bodied world hasn't responded to it. So that has to happen for any kind of larger discourse on pleasure, safe spaces everywhere. Just roaming around is difficult. I can't step out in many parts of this country. And when I can't step around, people who use wheelchairs, they of course find it even worse. To live independently in this country is very difficult. So basics are not yet there. So we are yet to go from that. Pleasure will, of course, and so a lot of disabled people, of course, are saying to themselves, okay, a lot of people these days anyways can't get married, can't have, they of course envy. There's a constant battle which goes on, but there is this, that okay, we'll reach there first. Let's be able to live with some dignity. Let's get a job. So the first thing which disabled people did was to get government jobs. And the people who did well are now actually the people who who have balance in their lives much more than people who didn't. And when you say this to young disabled people that get a government job, they will beat you up. They'll say, what kind of influencer are you? What kind of, you are definitely not an influencer, but what kind of disability activist are you? But actually, as you grow older, you realize money, to find a house, to find these things are so important to be part of this society. If you are not even part of this society, how will you change it? And a lot of my blind friends have been part of the society for a long time. They haven't been able to change it. So as I said, we have made the move. Let the able-bodied world respond.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Srinidhi, you mentioned in your interview that, and I quote, disabled people do have a wide range of lived experiences, but they might not have many spaces where they can speak openly about their sexual experiences or even sexual curiosity. What is the significance of access to these spaces and how can it be increased? Feel free to respond to what Abhishek has said so far. And how can a digital magazine like in Plainspeak provide support and be a platform that prioritizes safety, inclusiveness, and self-affirmation?
I mean, I think that I also, when I read it, I was thinking that quite a lot of stuff has changed since 2021. I know it's 3 years only, but I do feel like a lot of stuff has changed. There has been a lot of work in many parts of the country, right? Abhishek curated a series on sexuality for Agents of Fish, which was fantastic. There was a point of view-led project called Pyar Plus, which focused on young people with disabilities and their sexuality, and was very long-ranging, etc. And of course, TARSHI has been working on this for many, many years, right? And there are several organizations, I feel, who have attempted to sort of expand our understanding on these issues. And then, I mean, I'm part of disability groups. And then yesterday there was some conversation in one of them about the movie that just came out, and that there has been a Supreme Court order to think about representation of disabled people, right? Like in films, etc. I do think that we need a response which is sort of larger than the response we have now in terms of who is the person responding, right? To be fair, the department is still called Divyangja, right? So we have a long way to go in terms of personhood, right? To imagine personhood in a way that is diverse, but also that a personhood that has likes, dislikes, what do you say, dreams, no dreams, everything, right? And I feel like that the spaces that are growing where people can speak, they are of course super, super valuable, and I'm glad to have them, right? It feels like there was so much less when I was growing up, and I have so much more now, which allows for me to feel more seen than I have felt in the decades before, right? But it also needs a larger response in terms of um, because the stigma is too much, right? And we still don't have an everyday understanding of what something could be, right? I still find myself in different capacities explaining to parents of children with disabilities that is anxiety, that she can't control it, right? It's going to be different from day to day, and we have to uh, sort of work around this in a better way, right? And that, but there's also a massive stigma because they don't want to access the supports that the school provides for children with disability, because it means quote unquote outing their child, right? And of course, this is also like language around disability and queerness. There is a lot of overlaps, right? Because we think about them in very similar ways, especially around invisible disabilities, perhaps, right? But it's and it's easy for me to tell the parent, no, we'll find the support to provide the child, we'll support her, etc. But it's also hard for me to predict what that outcome is going to be for that child, right? It's possible that this situation, it turns out okay, and in another situation where she speaks about her disability is categorized as mad, right? Which is the correct direct correlation we make as a society around psychosocial disabilities, right? So I feel like the repercussions sometimes are different in different ways, right? Who are we speaking about our disabilities with, right? Because there are two different kinds of needs. There is a need for the community to feel seen, to belong, to know that there are other ways to be. For younger disabled people to have older disabled people speak about experiences that they might have in the future, right? And to think about options and ways, etc. And then there is the non-disabled world that needs to learn about our existence, right? So it's the many facets of communication that are needed are definitely a lot, right? And it does require us to do things that are bolder and bigger, you know. But it also requires a lot more political will, you know, to see disabled people as active citizens, as part of our nourishing spaces, and to see what it means for more people to lead, to be in the forefront, to have like dreams, aspirations, etc.
Thank you so much, Srinidhi. Let's go back to our audience with the same question. How can In Plainspeak serve, or platforms like In Plainspeak serve and support the community, especially in terms of inclusion? A Menti link has been shared in the chat, and you can use that to respond. And again, as we mentioned before, we plan on collating these responses anonymously into a short piece for the July Queering as a Way of Life issue. Thank you so much, Abhishek and Srinidhi, for your insightful responses. We have a little bit of time. Would you like to share some parting thoughts, if possible, Abhishek, Srinidhi?
Nothing really which comes to mind. But yeah, if you want me to talk about something, I think the conversation had reached the
Srinidhi? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. With this, the webinar comes to an end. Thank you so much to Abhishek and Srinidhi for taking out time to be a part of this event. You've given us a lot to think about today, and we really appreciate it. And I think we will go back to your pieces also with new thoughts in our mind as we read them. I would also like to share my gratitude for the TARSHI team members who have provided support and advice behind the scenes leading up to this webinar. With a special mention for Nandini, who partnered with me to conceptualize this event and has handled all logistics today and every day leading up to the event. I would also like to thank Khushri and Preeti for doing Indian Sign Language interpretation today, at the event and making it a slightly more accessible. Last but not the least, thank you so much, all of you, for being such a lovely audience and giving us an hour of your day today. You can check out in Plainspeak online and you can read about our upcoming themes. The theme for August and September is workplaces and sexuality, and we have the June issue on queering as a way of life coming out to you sometime next week, hopefully. We are always open for submissions and you can go through the guidelines. So please do not hesitate to send us your writing. We hope you all go on queering your lives in every way possible and making all of our lives more vibrant than before. Until next time, thank you so much. Good night. Bye.
Thank you, Arif.
Bye.